An angel of the Lord shone unto Mary, and she was frightened by this visit. And the angel said, Behold, the Lord has found favor with you. You will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, or in other verses, Emmanuel, meaning God is with us. And Mary responded, Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. So what's this all about? The story of Mary as the mother of Jesus. Mary, the mother of God. Why are Catholics so hung up on Mary as the mother of the church? And what really does this have to tell us about us and our story as Christians? It's interesting to note that the original scriptural story, the very beginning of the book of the Bible, Genesis, is about God being with us. Because it was in the garden that the Spirit of God, walked among them. So in the very beginning, God walked with us. God was with us. This is not a new story of God being with us. But it certainly is a new awareness of how God would be with us. Through the human birth, through human life, is how we would recognize God with us. So Jesus is of course to be promised to be born through Mary. Mary then becomes the mother of Jesus. And if Jesus is indeed God with us, then Mary becomes the mother of God. And why this is significant to us is because Mary held Jesus in her womb. And while she was the first to have Jesus inside her, she would not be the last. Because by the very notion of Eucharist, we receive Jesus in the bread and the wine, which become the body and the blood. God with us. So the reason why it's so important to see Mary as God with Mary is because it is the same God that is with us. And Mary then guiding and raising Jesus as the mother of Jesus becomes our mother. Not because she raises us and births us, but because she becomes the blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb. She becomes the model of what it is to say yes, to be the handmaid or the handman of the Lord, to be willing and allow God to live and have its being within us. And so noting this, how does this story change our lives today at Christmas? In 2023, moving into 2024, how is it any different? How does this notion of God with us, God in us, God working through us, how does this play into our lives, our relationships, our work, our money, our financial responsibilities? In the words of St. Paul, when speaking about his belief in Jesus, he says, I live no longer I, but Christ with me. And so perhaps this is one way we can see it, is we live no longer ourselves, but God with us. God with us in our relationship, our challenge, our struggles, our arguments. God with us in our finances, our challenges, our struggles, paying the bills. God with us. God with us in our work, our challenges, our difficulties, our hardships. God with us. God is with us in our world, our challenges, our social society, and our national and international dilemmas and difficulties. and atrocities, God is with us. We are a nation under God. We are a world under God. We are a universe under God. We are a world and a universe, God with us, so that we live no longer ourselves, but God is with us. Now, being a human being, what does that mean? It means that we can, at any moment, stop and ask God for the right thought or action. We can stop and ask God for guidance before we make choices which have outcomes and determine consequences in our lives. God with us. When we can't answer a question, we don't know the answer. We are faced with a difficulty, a dilemma, an adversity that seems too hard to bear. God with us. God with us. This is what the early church knew when they would gather together and celebrate in accord and begin communion. This is what we do at Mass. God with us. We remember, we recall, so that we might reconnect to this notion that the divine is with us. We are not individually the divine. We are corporately the divine, and we call it the body of Christ. Mary then, being the mother of the church, becomes not only an example, but a guide of God with us. How is God with us? By saying, "Behold, let it be done unto me as thy will." And that is a beautiful story. So we look at the wise men, we look at the nativity. St. Francis was known for bringing together the story of the Feliz Navidad, the Christmas story, in the form of a nativity, a physical arrangement, piece of art of baby Jesus and Mary and Joseph, livestock, the wise men, and the shepherds. God with them. Let this be a meditation piece, a contemplative piece. Can we look at this nativity and can we imagine all of a sudden back in Bethlehem, back there, in a stable, in a feeding trough, this baby Jesus. Above this city, a bright, shining northern star to illuminate this great event. Livestock at peace, gathered together, and all in the name of Emmanuel, God with us. So we look at a nativity today, and we can imagine that we're right there at this great birth, this physical manifestation in the universe that would shift everything. Except for Mary, most of the people in that story, in that nativity, never saw Jesus again. That was all. That was it. The great North Star led them there. The birth kept them there. What they had come to do, they did. And then they left. And they went on their way. Where are we in this story? Will we be drawn to God with us notion and celebrate and give gifts and call it Christmas and then wait until Easter? Or will we in fact be shifted in our own lives? Allow ourselves to turn, to remember, to recall this great event and be transformed by it. By the notion that God is with us. And God, since the beginning, never left us. We left the garden, the dwelling place of God, and God found us in his Son, and God found us in the prophets, And God found us in the kings, and God found us in the sages and the saints throughout time. But it is in Jesus that God called all who believe in him to everlasting life.